Welcome back once again to Xbox Corner. My name's Luke, and today on the channel we're bringing you a review for SpongeBob SquarePants: The Cosmic Shake. And this one is essentially a successor to 2003's Battle for Bikini Bottom and its rehydrated remake, which once again sees us stepping into the shoes of porous protagonist SpongeBob, who alongside pal Patrick embarks on a haphazard adventure to save Bikini Bottom from a calamity of his own making. But is this one worth your time and cash, or should it just have been left at the bottom of the ocean? Well, drop a like, subscribe for more Xbox reviews, deals and graphical comparisons, and let's find out. So before we get started then, if you're considering picking this one up, need to renew your Game Pass membership for the new year, or are just looking for a bit of a store credit, then consider heading over to Corner Shop GG, where you can use our discount code CORNER at checkout, which not only nets you a tidy 10% discount, it also really helps us out here on the channel. With that said and out the way though, when it comes to the storyline of this one, I won't profess to knowing anything at all about the world of SpongeBob, and though I've watched a few of the cartoons over the years, admittedly it's a little after my time. But even if you've never heard of the series and don't know anything about its characters, the Cosmic Shake-Up is pretty much a standalone storyline, and there's still plenty to enjoy with it. The game kicks things off though with an intro to the main characters, as we find SpongeBob excitedly prepping for a day out to the magical Glove World, a Disneyland type theme park, and after finally managing to rouse Patrick from his slumber, the pair arrive at Glove World and encounter a mystical mermaid lady flogging some rather shifty words. After being fleeced into buying a vial of dodgy liquid from her, which he then uses to blow bubbles with, things go a little awry and Bikini Bottom is effectively demolished, with its residents and most of the belongings sucked into magical portals. Rather conveniently though, our mermaid friend is once again on hand to provide some helpful advice, endowing SpongeBob with a variety of costumes, which he can then use to enter the portals and the worlds beyond them to recover the lost goods and clean up the cosmic goop which now covers the town. Each world you enter though kind of has its own little storyline going on, with familiar faces assuming the roles of the different characters, such as Squidward becoming the director of a kung fu movie, and the Flying Dutchman attempting to recover his stolen ship from returning antagonist Prawn. But each scenario brings the usual, plenty of gags and silly humour, with a few cheeky jokes thrown in here and there for the adults, and overall I quite enjoyed its narrative. Whether or not fans of the series will enjoy it as much as I did remains to be seen. It's a little disjointed and none of the stories really feel quite as complete as a standard TV show episode, but it's fun enough for a playthrough, and I felt that the narrative worked really well as a foundation for the gameplay. Now, like I said, I know very little about SpongeBob as a franchise, and that includes the game series, but if you played Battle for Bikini Bottom, specifically the rehydrated remakes, you'll already be familiar with many of the gameplay mechanics that the Cosmic Shake has to offer. Again, it's predominantly focused around third-person platforming, plenty of combat and a spot of puzzle solving, but unlike Bikini Bottom, you'll be playing solely as SpongeBob himself, so there's no switching between characters, which does see a reduction in variety when it comes to the general gameplay. The control scheme though is pretty much identical. SpongeBob gets a double jump, once again attacks using his bubble wand, can fire off bubbles which he can use to activate switches and encapsulate enemies, and along the way you'll pick up a selection of other abilities, including a Sonic style homing attack in the form of a karate kick, a Mario-esque ground pound ability, and a grappling hook, and several of these are used in both combat as well as for solving puzzles and traversing the terrain, and in general the controls are pretty solid, though I did have some issues with the lock-on mechanics not actually locking on, and the grappling hook swinging can be pretty fiddly, but overall they're not too bad and easy enough to get to grips with. Now when it comes to the format of the game, the Cosmic Shake-Up is kind of semi-linear in its progression, and what I mean by that is you start off in Bikini Bottom, which acts as a kind of hub world, and then you enter into each of the portal worlds in order, but many of them feature wide open spaces with optional side routes for you to explore, and once you've obtained the required abilities you can then return back to them to snag any of the unreachable collectibles you've missed. Alongside a few side quests, these collectibles form a substantial part of the side content of the game, with there being golden doubloons to gather which unlock additional costumes, hidden bubble ones which I never really found a use for, and Patrick's post-it notes which are scattered all over Bikini Bottom. But when it comes to the levels themselves, they're mostly linear affairs with clearly defined routes through them, though there are a few shortcuts you can take if you feel like putting your platforming skills to the test. Each of the worlds though features a different theme, from movie lands and pirate havens to magical castles and a volcanic caveman world, so there definitely feels like there's more variety to them when compared with Bikini Bottom. When it comes to gameplay, rather than just progressing from point A to point B in levels, you'll usually be traversing back and forth across them, activating switches or gathering collectibles, which then opens up a route forward. And the levels themselves are surprisingly large, which admittedly after spending about 30 minutes or so in them, I did find became a little bit tiresome, but the developers have tried to incorporate more set pieces to keep things interesting, so think things like minigames, Crash Bandicoot style riding sections and a few simple puzzles to solve. There is however still a very heavy focus on the platforming elements, but again the devs have tried to keep things varied, adding in Mario-like slide sections, switching up the camera perspective at certain points and throwing in some boulder rolling antics, and SpongeBob's moveset is also put to good use with plenty of grappling hook swinging and lock-on kicks thrown into the mix. So overall the levels don't overstay the welcome by too much, and there's enough variety in its platforming and set pieces to break things up a bit. Now on the combat side of things, whilst relatively simple, it's not without at least a little bit of challenge, and again SpongeBob's moveset actually adds a decent amount of fluidity and strategy to it, with your homing kicks allowing you to leap from enemy to enemy. However, enemy variety itself is a little lacking in my opinion. You have cosmetic jelly grunts which take a single hit to kill, a couple of different ranged enemies and a couple of meatier ones, including a behemoth who swings a bathtub about and an annoying jelly pile who spawns additional grunts and stuns you if you get too close, but the majority of these take just a couple of hits to kill, and aside from the bathtub dude, the movesets offer very little in the way of challenge. Another criticism I have is with the boss fights, as aside from the final big boss fight, there's only one which actually involves you fighting the boss directly, and the rest of them felt a little more like puzzle solving experiences with you battling against the standard enemies whilst trying to complete specific objectives, and I really would have liked to have had my combat skills put to the test in these fights rather than just my dodging and platforming skills. Overall though, the mixture of platforming, puzzle solving, minigames and combat come together to form a relatively decent action platforming experience, and the characters and scenarios add some nice variety and much needed humour, with plenty of dialogue to enjoy as you work your way through each unique biome. There are a few more frustrating elements, like the sections where you're locked into a combat segment and surrounded by a cosmic barrier, which rather annoyingly the enemies have a habit of walking through, making them inaccessible, and the riding mechanics are a bit finicky, having you move from side to side between a few different lanes rather than letting you move freely. But undoubtedly the biggest missed opportunity with the game is with its costumes. Each new costume allows you to access a new portal, but aside from that, they serve no other purpose, and I feel like the developers could have really got creative with them and incorporated some unique costume-specific mechanics into levels to really make them feel like a core gameplay element. But as it is, you can just switch to whatever costume you want, whenever you want, and aside from the visual aesthetics, which it must be noted don't even take effect during cutscenes, they have no impact on the game whatsoever, which to me was a real shame. On the whole though, the Cosmic Shake is not a bad little action platformer. I'd say the difficulty factor is relatively tame, though there are a few more challenging platforming and combat segments which younger kids will likely struggle with a little, but on the whole it's a pretty easy playthrough. The storyline is engaging enough despite it being a little disjointed, but it works well to bring variety and there's still plenty of classic SpongeBob humour to enjoy with it, which should satisfy fans of the franchise. And I'd say that if you enjoyed Bikini Bottom, then you should enjoy this one, as there's plenty of similarities, but also a little bit more variety in terms of its gameplay mechanics and level designs, and I for one had an enjoyable enough time with it. Now when it comes to the visuals, from what I can tell, the same game engine has been used with Cosmic Shake, and so the visuals are pretty much identical to Bikini Bottom. However, the game does benefit from the next gen systems with a more vibrant colour palette, higher resolutions and some sharper texture quality. While there appears to have been some reuse of assets from the previous title, the worlds themselves look pretty spectacular, especially in some of the larger ones where the huge draw distance allows you to see the previous locations you've visited way off in the distance, and there's also plenty of little details to the environments which make them feel alive and generally offer a more pleasant visual experience. Unfortunately, there are however some frame rate issues here, even on the Series X, with the game's usual 60 FPS frequently dipping to around 50 frames per second, which does make for some noticeable stuttering, especially in the Movie Land level, and there are also some very noticeable texture popping throughout the game's cutscenes. But for the most part things are pretty stable, and the game's art style really works well to deliver the classic cartooniness of the TV show. So on the audio side of things, the game sounds pretty good. We get some nice sound effects to enjoy, and the voice acting is top notch with the official SpongeBob cast voicing all of the usual characters, though once again SpongeBob does have a habit of repeating the same lines of dialogue over and over, which does become a little bit irritating. The game's soundtrack is also pretty decent. It's not overly memorable and features the usual assortment of upbeat tunes which you'd expect from this kind of game, so think piratey themed music in the pirate level, some tropical sounding steel drum music in the volcano level, and a mysterious fantasy ditty in the creepy ghost level. But the tracks fit well with the level's themes, and overall the audio is pretty solid in this one. So when all's said and done then, having never played Bikini Bottom, I enjoyed my time with the Cosmic Shake. However, I expect some of the criticisms of the previous game will re-emerge with this one. The devs have tried to up the variety in terms of the level designs and the mechanics though, and the scale of levels and lack of loading screens mean you spend less downtime and more time whacking slime monsters and hopping between platforms. The minigames and set pieces keep things interesting, and the refined combat system makes encounters with the enemies much more engaging. But the missed opportunity with the costumes really is a big one for me with this one, and they could have been used to really iterate on the original formula and elevate it with some unique gameplay dynamics, instead of having them serve only as cosmetic alterations and an excuse to release a costume-based DLC package. Finally, on the story side of things, like I said, it's a little fragmented, but still brings plenty of that SpongeBob humour which should prove sufficient enough to cater for fans of the series. And so overall, when it comes to a rating, we're going to be giving SpongeBob the Cosmic Shake an above average 6 out of 10. It's not the most original action platformer I've played, and it still sticks pretty close to its roots in terms of its complexity and the overall feel of its gameplay, but it's a fun enough playthrough and fans of the original will no doubt enjoy this one. With that said though, are you a SpongeBob fan? Did you play and enjoy Bikini Bottom? And are you going to be picking this one up? Let me know down in the comments section below. As always though, be sure to drop a like if this review helped you out, subscribe for more Xbox content including reviews, deals, graphical comparisons and Game Pass content. Thanks once again for watching, and we'll catch you all in the next one. Thanks everyone, take care.